The Santa Clarita Valley was rapidly evolving from a sleepy agricultural town into a large suburb of Los Angeles in the late 1960s. Out west, the Newhall Land and Farming Company was turning cow pastures and onion fields into the new town of Valencia.
And when that happened and the first homes began to be built, it was obvious that they needed to offer excellent special medical care to all these new homeowners that would be coming out to this area.
3 small hospitals served the Santa Clarita Valley in the 1960s. Newhall Community, Golden State, and Santa Clarita Hospital, which was later called Inter Valley and eventually Hillside. Newhall Land partnered with one of the state's oldest and biggest nonprofit healthcare providers, the Lutheran Hospital Society, to expand local hospital service for all of these new home buyers.
You know, I was president of the Chamber of Commerce. In those days, it was the Newhall Saugus Chamber of Commerce. And we talked about how we needed a community hospital out here in 1965, but we didn't know how to go about it. And it really was Tom Lowe of the Newhall Land and Farming and Sam Tibbetts of the Lutheran Hospital Society, and they got Adrian Adams involved. And they called almost 20 of us that were community people and got us involved in the board, and the board began to meet and figure out how to raise some money.
My opinion at that time was brick and mortar made a hospital. I learned very quickly that is not true. It prepares a place for doctors, but you need people, and they're what makes the hospital. And we were so fortunate when Henry Mayo came about that Hillside Hospital had already formed a volunteer organization, and these people were so wonderful.
The Santa Clarita Valley's original group of hospital volunteers actually came together in the wake of a disaster more than a decade before Henry Mayo came along. In the wee dark hours of October 12, 1962, a southbound Greyhound bus slammed into a grain truck on the fog-shrouded Ridge Route near Castaic. 1 bus passenger died and 23 others were injured, including a 19-year-old Navy sailor who lapsed into a coma and never regained consciousness. It was clear that the Santa Clarita Valley was not equipped to deal with so many victims at one time. The community's leading ladies responded. Assistant Administrator Lena Huntsinger of Santa Clarita Hospital put out a call for volunteers. The Santa Clarita Methodist Church Women's Society of Christian Service responded by forming a group of non-nursing volunteers to assist hospital patients. Santa Clarita Hospital provided uniforms for the volunteers, striped overalls for the junior volunteers, and peach-colored outfits for the adults, who came to be known as the Pink Ladies. Their official name was the Santa Clarita Valley Women's Auxiliary. For the next 10 years, the auxiliary helped with occupational therapy, they hosted hospital tours, and they even organized field trips for convalescent patients. They also knew how to have a good time. Fashion shows and high teas were popular recruiting and fundraising efforts throughout the 60s and 70s. Meanwhile, plans were being set in motion for a new 3-story, 150-bed hospital in Valencia.
And I think having a nonprofit hospital was very important instead of having a proprietary one.
The Newhall family, together with Newhall Land executives, donated $1.6 million and 25 acres of raw land at the future T intersection of McBean Parkway and Orchard Village Road. In December 1970, the hospital board launched a fundraising drive to raise the rest of the $8.5 million that was needed for construction.
I remember we wanted to have a golf tournament, and Gil Stratton came, and we had our golf tournament over at Valencia Country Club, and it was to raise money.
The 1971 Sylmar earthquake sent planners back to the drawing board. New seismic regulations had the effect of cutting the hospital down in size to 2 stories and just 99 beds. The next year, the Lutheran Hospital Society purchased the former Santa Clarita Hospital and renamed it Hillside. It became a training ground for Henry Mayo, which was now under construction. Bobby Trueblood was the hospital's first official employee. Her job was to drum up community support. Meanwhile, volunteer director duties fell to a volunteer herself, Joyce Wayman. Her job was to recruit an army of volunteers for this big new hospital.
Joyce Benelli had a tea at the Benelli Ranch to encourage people to volunteer at the hospital, and we got 250 volunteers from that, and from our advertising in the community. I mean, the whole community knew that the hospital was coming.
My husband retired, and he wanted to volunteer, so he volunteered and I volunteered. Most of the time, I was trying to talk to the families and see that, what could I do for them.
The gift shop was a plum assignment for volunteers because they could see the fruits of their fundraising efforts firsthand. A small gift shop opened at Hillside in 1974, serving as a training ground for the move to Henry Mayo in '75.
But prior to the hospital opening, the volunteers gave tours to the public, show them the new hospital. So I was one who did that, and I proudly led my group up to a door, and I opened it, and it was a closet. So it was one of those whoops moments.
There wasn't one thing arrived for opening day in the gift shop but stuffed animals. We had ordered jewelry, we had ordered everything, because you have to go downtown to do it. And it's supposed to all been delivered. Animals. So we filled the shelves with animals.
Money from the gift shop translated into advanced healthcare technology for the hospital. In the coming years, gift shop proceeds would buy a portable x-ray machine, a pulmonary function analyzer, and a fracture table used in hip surgery. In 1981, the volunteers took their fundraising activities on the road. Auxiliary members perfected their recipes in their home kitchens for a Bon Appetit cookbook. They organized the first home tours and set up an off-campus thrift store.
Joyce decided we should have a hospital thrift shop. So we found a place on 13th Street and opened the hospital thrift shop there, which ran for quite a while until it was turned over to the Guild, which was a fairly new hospital organization.
That's because patient care was really job one for auxiliary standouts like Carmen Sorrow and Jack Boyer. The late 1970s saw a need to combat patient boredom, and thus was born the craft cart. Stocked with donated items and staffed by volunteers, the craft cart helped patients pass the time during long hospital stays. Future patients were made to feel right at home as well. Expectant mothers and fathers, too, were invited to monthly parent previews to get a tour of the hospital and get their questions answered. And then there was the Tell Life system. Long before anybody dreamed of searching the internet for medical information, hospital volunteers staffed a telephonic service where residents could call and ask to hear one of 150 different cassette tapes with recorded information on health topics from A to Z, or at least from acne to x-rays. Programs like the Parent Preview and the Craft Cart have even given rise to new things like the Tyke Hike, which introduces soon-to-be big brothers and sisters to the hospital, and the Pet Therapy Program.
We hear wonderful stories about how they've affected a patient. It's a different way of having someone spend time as opposed to just thinking that they're laying in a bed and, with time on their hands and thinking about how much pain they're in. It gives them a diversion.
50 years after that first call for volunteers, Henry Mayo Newhall Memorial Hospital's auxiliary has a cast of hundreds. From the cheery hello in the lobby, to the helpful cashier in the gift shop, to the happy greeting from that four-legged friend, volunteers supply the extra comfort that makes a hospital stay not just endurable, but pleasant.
And I'll tell you, our volunteers, they're one in a million. I had a friend, Lou Bohack, that was so dedicated. If she hurt her legs, she had to put her on the floor to walk, and she'd say, "I'm not dead yet. I'm going to keep going, Gloria." I said, "Don't stop. That's why you're living."
They've done a lot of tests over the years, and they say it's actually healthier because people that volunteer have a tendency to live longer.
I think it's a sense of giving and being able to help others and help the community, and the hospital is something that we all use at one time or another.
And the people, the connection with people was very gratifying for me.
For one nice thing, it keeps you busy. You meet great people. You're doing something worthwhile. And make lifelong friends.
And to this day, that hospital could not function without their grand volunteers. Volunteers do everything